Hi guys, so today's video is going to be a chatty discussion video on the pros and cons of Goodreads. Because I have more cons, I'm going to start with a con and then I'll alternate, but at the end that's going to mean that I end up doing 2 cons in a row, so sorry to be kind of on the negative side here. But the first con I have is that there is no proof of reading the book. There's no receipts, essentially. I think we've all seen people who we know have not received ARCs of a book, and they go out of their way to rate a book that's not even out yet a 1-star solely because they don't like that author and they have too much time on their hands. Switching over to pros, a huge pro of Goodreads, and one that I actually do use Goodreads for, is that it's really informative. Anytime I'm wondering about a book that I don't actually own a physical copy of, or I'm not at the bookstore, if I'm curious about what is the synopsis, how many pages is it, what's the genre, all of that information is there. It's also really good for when you're looking up release dates or you've got some anticipated releases. Maybe you heard a little bit of buzz about a book that you thought, oh, that sounds interesting. And then you go and look it up on Goodreads and there's a lot of information on it. It helps you see what books that you might be interested in the upcoming months or years. The next con is diversity, but not in the way that we usually think when we think diversity. I actually mean the range of ages of users for Goodreads. I have mentioned before that it's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, and not enough where I'm gonna hate a person who does this or anything, but a little bit I get frustrated when I see people put down books that are meant for younger audiences for doing things that make sense for younger audiences. So for example, I didn't absolutely love the Percy Jackson, The Lightning Thief. And that's because I recognized that that one maybe was a little too young for me. Some of the foreshadowing was a little heavy-handed. That's because it's meant for kids, and subtlety with children is not necessarily what we're going for here. There's a reason that kids' movies have brighter colors. There's a reason that the expressions on characters' faces are so much more extreme, and that translates in pages as being way more abrupt in your face, that sort of thing. But as an adult, if I were to rate a book lower because it did what it was supposed to do for its target audience, that's unfortunate when people are looking at the rating and they're thinking, oh, I guess this isn't a very good book. I won't buy it for my 9-year-old, but it's like other 9-year-olds probably love it. They're just not using Goodreads. On the flip side, I would consider myself a relatively young person, but as a relatively young person, I'm fairly familiar with the internet. I use the internet a lot. There are a lot of other people who don't use the internet that much, but are huge readers and have read way more books than I have. When I talk about fantasy, or when I talk about, well, basically fantasy is the thing I read primarily the most. When I talk about fantasy, I am basing it off of the amount of years that I have been reading, which is significantly less than somebody who is significantly older than me. It almost feels like we're a group of high schoolers who are asking college students about a topic that we are interested and passionate about rather than going to the professors, if that makes sense. So it doesn't mean that age means wisdom and that everybody who's older is going to have better things to say. Also doesn't mean that all young children are going to be really good at rating a book, but it would be nice if we had a little bit more of an accurate representation for what the target audience is for a book, or for people that actually have this vast knowledge of a genre, of tropes, of writing, things like that. It would be nice if we could get more of that. Moving back to the pros, this is something I know for a lot of people is one of the most beneficial things about Goodreads, and that's the ability to track what you've read, what you're reading. It's just so nice. You don't have to write things down. You don't have to make lists. It's just all right there. It also helps you keep track of books that you heard about, you were interested in, and then maybe you wouldn't remember if you hadn't put it in your Goodreads as a want to read type of book. I feel a little bit bad that the pros are ending up so much shorter in how much I talk about them than the cons, but that's gonna continue with this next one, and that would be quantity over quality. A lot of people use Goodreads and they set Goodreads goals to help them stay accountable for whatever their goal may be. Maybe they wanna read 50 books in a year, maybe they wanna read 100, and I'm not dissing that. I'm not saying that you shouldn't set goals. Being goal-oriented is a good thing for a lot of people. It motivates them. And I also think that people who read a lot, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not really reading the book, really soaking everything in and providing good reviews. I'm not implying that in any way. However, There are some people that care more about how many books they read, and it's almost like this thing they hold over other readers' heads. You can read for whatever reason you want. If you want to read books just to say you can read a lot of books, that's your business. That's fine. It's when we start to use this as a way to put other people down who don't read as many books that it's a problem. And I have seen it. I've seen people who were talking about individuals and saying, well, this person, I looked at their Goodreads shelf and they hadn't even read that many books, which is stupid on so many levels. First off, maybe the person doesn't keep their Goodreads account updated. Maybe they update it in some other form. And it's not just this one random person I saw. I've seen lots of people put a lot of emphasis on, well, that person reads a lot, I'm going to trust their opinion over that person. Even though that person's reviews might be better, more in-depth, more analytical, that person read a lot, so I'm going to go with them. Switching back to the pros, the next one would be reading suggestions. I do think that if you have a certain person you follow who you just really trust their reading tastes and you really trust their reviews, that when they put out a review for something that you've never heard of or that you've maybe heard of but you didn't know if you were interested in picking it up, you see it and now you're like, all right, I want to read that book. And you can find books that you would have never found on your own, all because somebody posted a review about it. Next con is very straightforward. It doesn't take very much time to talk about, and that would be that it has poor navigation. I personally, maybe I'm just really dumb, maybe I'm an idiot, but I don't think Goodreads is the easiest website to navigate. Sometimes I'll see a person and I think, I want to know other reviews they've done because I'm curious to see their tastes, and I'll click on it and I just can't find the other books they've read, or I'll try to see, well, what have they rated books, and instead I'm seeing the average rating for a book. And I'm like, I don't care about the average rating, I want to know what they rated it. The next pro is one that my husband uses all the time, and that is that you can highlight things about your stories that you're liking if you're reading them digitally, and it will automatically put those highlighted lines into your Goodreads. So it's kind of like tabbing your favorite quotes. It's that very same thing, except for you don't have to worry about needing an actual physical copy and then getting tabs or highlighters. You can find it very easily because it lines up with where that part is in the story. The next con for me is that star ratings have way too much ambiguity and power. So what I mean by this, it's honestly the core reason why I don't use Goodreads really. Nobody's going to rate exactly the same way. We don't rate specific aspects of a book, we just rate the book. And that is so difficult for me because I'll see books that don't have the most amazing of ratings that I end up really liking. But there are other people out there that if they see a rating below 4 or 4.5 stars, they won't even pick the book up. And I can't help but think, going back to what I was saying earlier, well, what if the target audience for this book isn't the group of people that are primarily reading and rating this book? Or what if this book just happens to have something in it that isn't really exactly trendy right now? Or what if maybe it's too deep and too dark and that's not something that all the people reading it are gonna like, but you're into that kind of stuff? I could go on and on and on about this one. But star ratings are just so all over the place. Some people try to be as objective as possible. Some people try to only rate on enjoyment because they just don't feel they can be objective. And it's so all over the place. And we put so much emphasis on that stupid average star rating, when really we should be looking more at reviews themselves and ignore the star rating, in my opinion. All that ranting aside, I am so guilty of seeing a book at a bookstore and being like, I've never heard of this book. I wonder what other people think of it. And looking at that star rating and being like, oh geez, it's pretty low. I'm not saying I don't do that. I just wish we as readers maybe a little bit actually would just be kind of old-fashioned. If you see a book and you think it seems interesting, check it out from your library or just buy it and read it and then see what you think. If you are somebody who only reads a book, it's 4.5 or above or something of that sort, that's your business. You can do that, that's fine. I don't mean to say that you're an awful human because you didn't want to spend money on something that you might not like or spend time on a book from the library that you might not like. I'm not trying to say any of that. I just mean that we sometimes care more about that star rating than we do about the review itself. When if we just for a second scrolled down and looked at some of the reviews, we looked at some positives, we looked at some negatives, we looked at some right in the middle, we would have a more well-rounded idea of if the book would be appealing to us or not. And we don't always do that, which is okay, but also it's a little bit of a bummer. The last pro, and I think one of the biggest ones for a lot of people for Goodreads, is the sense of community. There are a lot of little clubs and groups on Goodreads where people come together and they just geek out about books. And not everybody is super comfortable getting in front of a camera and starting a YouTube channel. Not everybody has the time to have a blog. So Goodreads is a great place for people to just come together and talk about books, and that's wonderful. My last 2 cons for Goodreads are pretty straightforward, and I'll get through them pretty fast. One would be responses to reviews are pretty minimal and sometimes just turn into dumpster fires of people yelling at each other or calling each other stupid feminists, SJWs, or sexist or racist. It just turns into name calling. And I don't always see, for a group of people that are supposed to have a lot of empathy and understanding because they, place themselves in other people's shoes all the time by reading books, we don't always have the best skills at communicating with people who disagree with us. That's more of a personal person problem, not really Goodreads' fault. But I do think that if Goodreads had a better set up platform when it came to conversation in the responses to reviews, I think maybe discourse could be a little bit more mature. This last con of Goodreads is one that I feel kind of bad even mentioning because I do BookTube, lots of other people do BookTube, and I know some people do this, and I'm not trying to throw shade, but self-promotion through Goodreads isn't really a review. If you leave a review and just say like, you should go look at my blog for more thoughts, or can't wait to talk about this book over on this other platform, that's not a review. I guess it could be a pro because if you follow a person on multiple platforms, then like, oh cool, when I get home I can go see what they have to say over on their blog or on their YouTube channel or wherever it is they post stuff, Twitter, I don't know. Wherever they end up doing other things other than this platform. If you are the kind of person that follows them on multiple places, then it's a cool way to be updated, but I just don't really think Goodreads is Twitter. Post on Twitter, hey, I put up a review, or post on Instagram, like, I have a review for this book that you're seeing a picture of, but on a website that's dedicated primarily to book reviews, your book review should be a book review. But you can tell I feel kind of uncomfortable even saying that. No shade. And to clarify, if you end up doing an in-depth review and then say like, you can also check out my blog, you can also check out my BookTube channel, that's cool. But if it's just like, here's a link. Links are in book reviews. Anyway, that is my list of some pros and cons of Goodreads. Ultimately, Goodreads, I think, really is a fantastic website, and it does a lot for a lot of people and for a lot of books and authors, so I think it's a great website. There's just some things that I think could be better or improved upon or are just an unfortunate side effect that probably can't be resolved, but I'm definitely really curious your thoughts on Goodreads. Thanks so much for watching though. I hope all of you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later.